Winter on the Great Plains was never a single danger. It was a hunter with many weapons, and it used them one at a time. Picture the land in the dead of January, flat and white and endless, where the wind comes screaming out of the north with nothing to break it for 100 miles. The temperature falls far below zero. The snow rises in drifts that swallow the earth whole. And out here the cold does not simply chill you, it hunts you. It reaches for you through the wind, and if that fails, through the weight of the snow, and if that fails, through the frozen ground beneath your feet and through the very air you breathe. A modern camper with the best gear made today might last a night against one of those weapons. Out here, all of them came at once, and yet, on nights exactly like this one, entire families lay down inside a shelter of wooden poles and buffalo hide, and in the morning they woke up alive, not shivering on the edge of death, but warm, rested, ready to face another day of the siege. Listen closely, and you can almost hear it, the storm howling and clawing at the outside of that thin cone of hide, and just on the other side of that wall, no thicker than the animals that once wore it, the slow and steady breathing of a sleeping family. One sound is fury, the other is survival. And here is what should stop you cold. That family inside would defeat every weapon Winter threw at them that night, every single one, except the last, the weapon Winter always saves for the end. To understand how they survived it, we have to start where the battle began. The battle began long before the first snow ever fell, because these people never let winter choose the ground they would fight on. In the warm months they roamed the open plains freely, but as the cold came down from the north, they moved, folding their shelters and following the land into river valleys, into stands of cottonwood, into the sheltered draws and coulees, where the earth itself rose up to block the wind. There they found running water, thick timber for fuel, and hillsides that broke the worst of the northern gusts before those gusts ever reached camp. Winter thought it commanded an open, empty battlefield. In truth, the people had already stolen the high ground, and only then, in that chosen place, did they raise their real defence against the wind. The shape did the work. Where a flat wall would have caught every gust like a sail and shuddered until it tore, the cone simply refused the fight, letting the air slide around its curved sides so that even a screaming storm wrapped itself around the shelter instead of striking it head-on. Snow behaved the same way, sliding down the sloped hide rather than piling into a crushing weight above, while inside, that rounded form pushed the warmth evenly through the whole space. Holding it all together was a frame of long lodgepole pine or cedar, leaned inward and bound near the top, strong enough to stand firm yet flexible enough to bend in the wind without ever snapping. Over that skeleton stretched thick buffalo hide, pulled tight to the earth, and in deep winter a second lining was hung inside it, trapping a pocket of still air between the layers that did the silent work of insulation. So the wind howled and clawed and searched for a way in, and it found nothing. It raced around the curve and slid off the hide and died in the timber, and the first weapon of winter simply missed. But the cold is patient, and it had already found another way in, not through the wall this time, but through the fire itself. The fire was survival, but it was also a threat, and that was the trap winter set next. To stay warm the family needed flame, yet in a space this small a roaring fire would fill the shelter with smoke and choke every lung inside it within minutes. So winter attacked from two directions at once, from above and from below, and both blows landed in the same breath. From above came the smoke, and the answer was never a bigger fire, but a wiser one, a low and steady heat fed by the right wood, and placed at the right spot, controlled with a patience that took years to learn. Above it, framing the smoke hole at the peak, sat two adjustable flaps that could be turned to face away from the wind, and when a skilled hand set them just right, they created a gentle upward draught that pulled the smoke out through the top while holding the warmth down below. It worked like a living engine of ventilation, something modern cabins and tents still fail to get right, and it meant the fire could breathe without ever poisoning the people it kept alive. And when night came, the fire was not allowed to die. It was banked. The glowing embers raked low and covered with a soft layer of ash, so the heat would live quietly until dawn. And in that moment the howling of the wind faded beneath the soft crackle of coals, and the shelter fell into a deep and living silence. But even a perfect fire could do nothing about the second blow, the one striking from below. The frozen ground pulls heat from a body faster than any wind, draining it away through direct contact hour after hour, and these people understood that danger long before science ever gave it a name. So they refused the bare earth entirely. They built the floor upward, in careful layers, grass and reeds and willow branches first, then woven mats, then buffalo robes and deer and elk, hides stacked one upon another, until a nest of trapped and breathing warmth sealed the cold ground away beneath them. And here is the thing to understand about this place. It was not a fortress of unmoving walls. It was a machine, one that had to be read and adjusted and tended by hand, hour after hour, all through the longest nights of the year. And that machine had one more defence that almost no one notices, because the walls of the shelter were never truly sealed. They were breathing. That second lining hung inside the outer hide created a chamber of air between the two, and cold air slipping in near the base was caught in that gap and gently warmed before it ever rose, while the fire above pulled the used air upward and out through the smoke hole. Fresh air entered low, smoke escaped high, and warmth circulated endlessly in between, a slow and silent climate system powered by nothing but fire and shape. But against a cold, this patient, even breathing walls were not enough, because winter's fourth weapon was not a single blow. It was the slow, grinding drain of heat across the whole long night, and to survive it the people turned to the warmest thing they owned, which was one another. Survival out here was never a solitary act. On the worst nights entire families folded into a single shelter, parents and children and grandparents and cousins pressed close in the dark, and nothing about where they lay was left to chance. Infants were wrapped tightly in fur and tucked between adults, where the warmth held steadiest. Smaller children stayed close to their mothers and grandmothers, and the elders rested nearest the fire where the heat ran strongest, honoured and protected at once. Even the dogs pressed into the circle and gave back their own warmth, until the whole shelter became a single living body, and the slow, even breathing of that sleeping family was the sound of the fortress winning. None of it would have been possible without the buffalo, which gave its meat for food, its bones for tools, its sinew for cordage, and its thick winter hide, fur still attached, as a barrier against the cold that no woven cloth of the age could match. And here is the part that changes everything. This fortress was not rooted to the ground like a fort of stone. It could vanish and rise again somewhere else, struck and packed in under an hour, and carried on the move, following the buffalo and the seasons across the plains. These people did not defend a single place against winter. They carried their survival with them. And so, blow by blow, the family turned back every weapon winter had, the wind, the smoke, the frozen ground, the endless draining cold. Every weapon but the last, the one that no buffalo hide and no fire could ever hold back. That last weapon was not the cold at all. It was time. Winter's final and cruelest attack was the sheer length of the siege, the endless dark nights stacked one upon another, the food that ran thinner with every storm, the isolation of a family cut off with no rescue coming and no help on the way. Cold can be answered with fire and hide, but despair and hunger and the slow grind of an unending winter cannot, and that is where the true defence finally reveals itself. It was never the shape, never the fire, never even the buffalo. It was knowledge. The hides could be replaced, and the fire could be rebuilt, But the understanding of how to use them had to live inside the mind, carried and taught and inherited. Children grew up learning to read the coming weather in the colour of the sky, to manage airflow, to keep the embers alive, to anchor the poles against a rising storm, and to watch the smoke for the first warning that something was wrong. Every winter was a classroom where the lessons were measured in survival itself. And look closely at the finest cold weather gear made today, and you will see that knowledge staring back at you. The insulated pad that lifts a climber off the frozen ground is the layered floor of grass and hide. The Arctic parka, trapping warm air against the body, is the heavy fur robe. The vent balancing oxygen against heat loss in a mountaineering tent is the smoke flap, turned just so against the wind. The technology changed, but the science never did. And here is the difference that lingers. Our walls are fixed, rooted to one spot, and in a sense they are dead. Their walls were alive and free, because survival to them was never a thing you built once and left standing. It was something you inherited and carried on your back, so winter could never truly corner them. So listen one last time. The storm is fading now, the fury outside sinking into the pale light of dawn, and all that remains is the slow, even breathing of a family that made it through. Which weapon of winter amazed you the most? The wind, the smoke, the frozen ground, or the long dark itself? Tell me below, and if the hidden intelligence of the ancient world is the kind of thing that pulls you in, stay close, because some of the oldest knowledge still burns the brightest.